Howdy, Immortallium here, and this is the concluding video of the What Video Should I Do Next Week video. The winner, the comment with the most votes, came from a guy called Arctic Banana. Now, I just want to bring up something quick before I address this question. In the What Video Should I Do Next Week video, I got a good response. A lot of people commented. But most of you guys did kind of, you asked your questions and no one, like only one person actually voted with a comment, in response to another comment. That was Archangel. Every other comment, I just thought that was interesting. So I just thought I'd bring that up. So the winning comment actually only had 2 votes, himself and Archangel. So I just thought that was interesting, something to bring up. Not to say that what you guys did was bad. I read through those comments and every single comment had a great question. So I just thought of it, if you saw that video and you didn't vote, I'm just kind of wondering why you didn't. So anyway, to address the question, so I broke this down into 2 parts. Hopefully that'll be fine. I just found it a bit awkward to write all of it out. So the first question is, how do I like my manga and anime? In reference to dark feeling, a dark atmosphere, or a kind of light-hearted feeling, and why? Which one do I prefer and why? Well, very clearly, I prefer the dark, in my opinion. If you look at my, top anime, for instance, you have Rin Daughters of Nimosne, you have Clannad, which, in fairness, Clannad can get very dark. I have Death Note, I have Code Geass, I have Puella Magical Magica. All 5 of those series are really dark. Now, the reason I prefer dark anime to lighthearted anime is simply because there's a lot more emotion, there's a lot more drama, there's a lot more themes. It's a more satisfying feeling, one can say. Now, that's not to say I don't enjoy lighthearted anime. I can think of several that I love. K-On! Is a good example, or on High School Host Club. A lot of Slayers is very light-hearted. Now, Slayers does get dark from time to time, but a lot of Slayers is quite light-hearted. And I really enjoy those anime. But as a total preference, I would probably say I prefer the darker. And that applies to the manga as well. Maybe to a lesser extent, like Death Note and Ayako are definitely dark. But in relation to, say, with the light raising an autistic child, it can get dark, alright. Particularly when it comes to the more realistic elements of raising a child in the real world. A child that's quite unusual. But there are those light-hearted moments where everything seems to go in quite right and everyone's just happy. So, with the light is kind of a perfect mixture of the dark and the light-hearted. But in general, I would say dark. I mean, if you look at the anime and look at the manga, that's where it clearly comes out. And I've explained why. Now, the second part of the question was, does finding a deeper meaning make a series more enjoyable? Now, that's very interesting that you brought that up. This question, I could tell, was the most popular one. So I was kind of thinking about it throughout the week, kind of wondering, how do I address that area? Because in fairness, that seems like a bit of a difficult question at first. But very conveniently, the series that I'm watching at the moment came up as a perfect example. So, what I'm watching right now is the second part of Fairy Tail. This would be episodes 24 to 48. What was the last one? I think the last episode I saw was 38, I think. So I'm not done this yet. But there are 2 arcs that I just want to address very quickly. First of all is the Loki arc in this, which is 3 episodes long. The Loki arc is spelled L-O-K-E. And it was a bad arc in my opinion. Now, it was way too lighthearted, it was unrealistic, there was no... I guess you could associate it with the real world abuse, but it just came off very poorly handled. So, in that case, I just found it, a very poor arc. But the next arc, Tower of Heaven arc, is, in my opinion, far superior. Now, there are a myriad of reasons for why it is superior to the Loki arc, But in reference to your question, one reason that I love the next arc is slavery, the use of slavery. The slavery was actually very well handled. Isolation, being isolated, fulfilling your purpose. There's a myriad of reasons why this arc is better than the previous one, but in reference to those questions, it's because I found a lot more real-world associations, a lot deeper themes. It's just a better arc, and it's because of that reason. Now, in reference to, other series, for example, let's take Rin, for instance. Rin is an Immortal series, it's a story of Immortals, and there's a very strong symbolism there for the aging process. The characters grow up and the characters around them die. And, it's a great sense of loss. And it kind of... I know this is the weirdest thing to compare, but Rin is quite like Toy Story 3, which dealt with kind of almost retirement. But in Rin's case, it's more to do with the loss and isolation that aging causes, whereas Toy Story 3 was more about, the actual, losing your purpose in life. But they're both very similar, and that adds so much to Rin, in my opinion. So, I just found, and also, like, other series like Moribito, for instance. Let's just take Moribito, a series that, isn't in my top 10, but is still a series that I would recommend. Moribito, it's very clearly about, familial bonds, about, the bonds of family. And even in that case where the relationship between the two lead characters isn't by blood, over the course of the series, the characters do develop a very strong familial bond. Which, those deeper meanings do add a lot to a series. And that would also apply to comedies as well. Like, for example, let's take Ouran High School Host Club. So, what Ouran High School Host Club essentially is the separation of, upper and lower class society. Now, in Ouran High School Host Club's case, it makes fun of it. It's like, oh, we're weirded out by them, but they're weirded out by us. And it's like a culture shock. But it makes a very good point, and I think it's handled very well, and it adds a lot more to the series. Now, let's take an example of a series that is essentially about nothing, at least in my opinion. A good example that would be Shikabane Hime. So Shikabane Hime, throughout the entire series of that, I was watching it, and I was trying to figure out what the series was trying to say. What was its theme? What was its message? And I struggled to find it. In the end, I kind of think what it was trying to say was, even in the event of loss, you must look around you and find that you're not always alone. But that's a bit of a stretch. I had to really put a lot of work into it. So that definitely took away from my enjoyment of the series, just trying to figure out what is its message. Because I was using a lot more brain power for that than actually watching the show. Now, there's a myriad of other reasons why the show was bad. It wasn't just that. But that was one of my bigger issues. And Elemental Jaleid, I didn't even bother trying to figure out what it was saying. After the first 5 episodes, I realized, it was just, an artificially constructed shonen-esque show. That was made to sell merchandise and games and all that jazz. So, that basically, if I can find a deeper meaning, yeah, it adds a lot more to my enjoyment of the show. That's to answer your question. And a lot of these would have to do with real world messages, but also would have to do with philosophical messages, to do with how one should live their life, how one should respond to certain events, etc., etc. And if a series has no message, then that becomes harder to enjoy it, I find. It doesn't even need a really deep message. K-on's message is simply, enjoy life, be with your friends and just enjoy every day. So that isn't a particularly deep message, it's not a particularly original message, but because it's a message in that series, it leaves you with a sense of gratification. It makes you think, I gained something from this, which is something that I didn't feel from Shikabane Hime or Elemental Jaleid. So, hopefully that answered the question well. I'm not sure how well I got across my message. A lot of this I was kind of winging, but I hope, I do think that deeper themes do definitely add to my enjoyment of the series. If there's no theme, I don't enjoy it. At least not nearly as much as I would. Yeah, that's it. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. I think I would class the what video should I do next week as a success. It got a lot of views, it got a lot of comments, there was a winner, but I do think there is room for improvement in the future, so that's just something to take into account. So thanks for watching, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye bye.